Is that a cowbell?
We are proceeding with agenda item 11, a update on public transport, and then we're going to leap into hotspot review.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I won't go through the report in detail unless councillors would like me to. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We have over the last weekend, the Art Deco weekend, run extra services and carried a record number of passengers, which was great and will add to our total for the year. Around 1,300 passengers carried on Napier services, and normally we'd carry about 300, so that will add to our total. Certainly will. In fact, we had to give an extra bus out at short notice to avoid leaving people behind. And just another comment in relation to our passenger numbers. As part of my role, I also report to the Regional Transport Committee, as you know, and we do an annual monitoring report on the transport system as a whole. And we monitor a range of things like vehicle kilometres travelled in the region. And those are going up, and not only going up because we've got more people coming into the region, but they're going up on a per capita basis. So people are travelling more by car. The other key stat from that report is that vehicle ownership per capita is up for the first time in quite some years. So it doesn't bode well for public transport when people own more cars per head of population than ever before. But I will just take any questions from the report.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see that we're continuing to juggle our bus options to cut back on where they're not doing so well and enhance them where they're doing well. I have two questions in addition to that. On clause part 6 of your report, you talk about District Health Board travel scheme and further increases. It continues to be very successful, 100% increase in bus use over the year. Do you see that as continuing to increase? And what's driven the 100% increase?
Patient travel scheme. The patient travel scheme was previously only for patients going to outpatients appointments from Napier to Hastings. And as part of the DHB's travel plan, they extended that to wherever the bus service operates. So we would have naturally expected an increase, and we are finding that there are a lot of people still coming from Napier, but Flaxmere, Havelock North, other Hastings services are now able to travel by bus using that scheme. And some of them would have been Super Gold passengers and would have done it anyway, but we're now picking up other people who didn't qualify under Super Gold.
So that's a very good health outcome.
Yeah.
Second one, which I was curious on, is on 11.1, and on Route 12 I see that you've written these services which are struggling to keep to time, and it's one of the reasons that it's shown a decrease. Why is the bus struggling to keep to time? Is it we've got a slow driver, we've got
Roadworks.
Hopefully not.
Roadworks? Is it because why aren't we keeping to time?
Well, there are a couple of issues. One, of course, is roadworks, and even before the Pakawhai links, the expressway improvement started, Hastings was resealing most of Pakawhai Road. That took quite a while. They're doing the sewerage mains down Hiratonga Street. Buses were being diverted around various sewerage or water, one or the other, down Hiratonga Street. So that's all contributed to it. We've got more cars on the road, and we've got particularly more cars on the road at peak time, and that is slowing the services down. So what we are going to look at, and this will have to be a fairly comprehensive review, is the possibility that not all of our Route 12 services go between cities, because it's quite a long journey. It takes an hour, and if they run late, it takes an hour 10, whereas people can drive for 30 minutes, 25 minutes. So I think we have to make that, we have to service those people that want to go between cities, but we have to make it more attractive because, of course, Route 12, if it's coming from Hastings to Napier and people just want to use it from EIT into town, they're picking up a service which is running 10 minutes late, and that's not a great look. So, yeah, so that's what we're trying to work on. we are hopeful that our ticketing system will also speed up the loading times, because if you've got a busy route, people topping up their cards on the bus, buying cash fares, all of that sort of thing takes time, and unfortunately.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep on banging on about it, but I'm so looking forward to the introduction of the ticketing system.
Service, so are we.
Yeah. And just a bit further to that, District Health Board travel scheme, I know that you, every now and then you advertise it through social media, and it still continues to get a lot of traffic in that respect, so we just should keep on doing that, just to remind people, and especially those who haven't heard about it since, so just keep on that, up that good work, would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great report. Can I just ask you a couple of questions in regard to your table at item 12, diagram 1? You've got in that one the monthly trips for that 6-month period. First question is, if we were to extrapolate out for a year, does that steady decline in passenger trips reflect for a full year?
That's the $64 million question. Not necessarily if we've had a good increase in school use, and that it fluctuates from year to year depending on secondary school numbers.
But for that 6-month period, there's quite a steady decline in numbers as a trend. Would you agree?
We've got a couple of months that are higher, but that will be probably related to the timing of school holidays.
Sure. So if we were to put that over, if your data, if we'd had a data set here for a full 12-month period over that 5 years, 6 years, would we see that same trend, a downward trend in number of trips?
Oh, I see what you mean, for the full year.
Yes.
We have seen that, yes,
Sure.
yes, and the last year's decline was very slight, only 4,000 or 5,000 passengers for the year, but we have seen definitely a decline over those that time, from the peak in 2013-14.
And just taking you down to your diagram 3 there, on the same page, we've got what seems to be contradictory is that the net costs have declined over that period, and is that related to your contracting?
Yes.
Well done on that. That's so we've got declining numbers, but we've got decreased costs to go with that, which is contradictory. The final question is, we're in the long-term plan process. We spend a lot of money in this area, even though it's 49% of the spend. The quantum is large for council. What is your 10-year forecast for the shape of passenger transport in this under this model in 10 years' time?
I mean, obviously we do 10-year predictions, but they, in my experience, have almost always proven to be wrong. We are very susceptible to petrol prices. So petrol prices drop, then patronage drops. Petrol prices, if we had a sharp increase to $2.30 a litre, we'd see a huge rush to the buses, as long as we can provide a reasonable service to cope with that rush. We're susceptible to fluctuations in student numbers, very much so, and we are susceptible to things like the ageing population, and we are hopeful from a bus point of view that as our population ages, which it is doing at a greater rate than ever before, that we will pick up a good number of Super Gold passengers, and I think we're already seeing that actually.
So your advice to council would be, is there a trigger point or threshold where you would say this is no longer viable for council to be in?
Well, certainly if we got to a very low fare revenue recovery rate, that's something that the council would have to look at, because they'd be saying the cost of running this is only being covered by, to the extent of, say, 30% or 25% by fares. So you've got an expensive service that's not being well used, and your options there are cut costs, increase fares. Increased fares sometimes drives patronage further down, particularly if people do the mental arithmetic around the cost of taking their kids to school instead of putting them on the bus. it's quite a complex sort of range of factors, and not always easy to predict exactly what's going to happen. But certainly, just yes, to answer your question, if fare recovery dropped way down, I think that's a trigger point for the council to say, do we need to be running such a comprehensive service?
Chairman, just a comment. The small drop-off in passenger numbers, or the progressive small drop-off in passenger numbers, in a sense is balanced, not numerically, but by the same trend in increasing total mobility trips. So they really need to be considered together in this environment where we've got ageing population, and every time someone has a stroke, they may well have difficulty accessing a bus, but they move on to the total mobility service. And the other thing is that the trigger point that seems to be of the greatest influence to people as to whether they drive their car or ride a bus is $2 or more per litre for standard gas, and it's been under that for a number of years. The indications are that it's likely to move back up. Is that it?
I think that's a fair comment, Councillor. Certainly in the past, when we've been to $2.20, $2.25, I think was the maximum it ever got to, across the country, regional councils saw an upsurge in bus use. But having said that, people get accustomed to huge jumps. It's shock and horror for a while, and then people get used to paying that amount, so you always get some sort of drop back as well, hopefully not to the original level.
I was watching a presentation on the internet a couple of months ago, and they were talking about self-drive vehicles, and they were predicting that they would be registered for use on the open road in the States at least by 2021, and I'm not quite sure how close behind we might follow. Has there been any discussion about self-drive buses? Certainly as part of the wider discussion there has been. I think, just my own personal viewpoint, I think it would be quite a long way away. A lot of issues to be ironed out because you've got a significant public safety hurdle to get over to make sure that they really work properly. And of course, it's a cost-cutting exercise, but it has a human cost as well in terms of jobs. So, yeah, I really don't know enough about it at this point to know at what stage we are likely to, as an industry, are likely to be confronting that.
Someone like to move adoption of the report?
Move in that
Mr.
direction,
Bailey?
Chair. I'll second.
Mr. Barker? Would either of you like to speak? No?
Very good report, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? I'll put the motion. All those in favor of receiving the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Sorry. Thank you. At some point there will be some triggers where a more substantial review probably will be.
Yes, I think we are reaching that point. Definitely.
Okay.
Hotspots.
Hotspots.
Thank you, Chair. So Jolene Townsend's going to come up and lead a large team of people through the discussion of the hotspots. It's a refreshed paper that just brings about some of the points that were made at the last meeting, giving a little bit more detail around what's in there. The presentation's going to be short and snappy and bring you right to the key points on all the projects.
Chair, I have a meeting in the building for about 10 minutes at 2 o'clock. I thought thought you may have been finished by then.
That's a criticism.
Not a criticism. So if you want me to, I can.
Just to withdraw an apology.
I can see you're going to be whaled down the speaking list from now on.
I will give 1 minute of context for this. I asked for this to be on the agenda because it's been 60 days plus since we really got any systematic reporting on these hotspots. And when I actually had this conversation with the staff, hotspots to me was not just what they treat as our official hotspots that are separately, we applied for separate funding for, so forth. We got a rate increase to pursue these. There's another set of hot issues, if you will, things like tomato mushrooms consents and how many water consents are on the Haratunga Plains after a moratorium, things like that. So all of that is going to be rolled in here, but starting with the official hotspots. And to me, the significance of this is we're about to consider a long-term plan that is looking like it's going to ask the public to support a hell of a lot more activity. These are the things that we said last year were essential to getting us off the launching pad. And if we're not making some noticeable progress on these projects, I would submit we will have a hard time convincing the public that we ought to be investing more in these kinds of activities. So I wanted this to get us to get a pretty serious look today at where all of this does stand and make sure that we're all satisfied with this. And as you've heard from Councillor Graham, a number of us have assignments to kind of be especially tracking some of this, and so we want to hear from you all as well as to how well we're doing here. So
pleased to be here today because we have made some progress. So we've got some good updates to talk you through. So just recapping, so there's the 6 hotspots. 2 of them are tied up in the Freshwater Improvement Fund. At this stage, the applications have been submitted, and we are waiting to hear back from the Ministry for the Environment. With regards to, I'll go back to the follow-up, sorry. With regards to Whakakī, there was a change in our stage 2 application process. We included 2 new deliverables, a weir and the Wakatuku alignment. So we had to provide additional documentation explaining why we added these and how we were still going to meet our deliverables with these new deliverables, objectives, with these new deliverables. And that was received really well, which is great. And at the moment, the Minister needs to approve those 2 additions, which we hope will happen on Monday, and then the process of the review will happen. So MFE are aware that we are waiting, so they will be working quickly to review that. So hopefully next week we'll hear about those 2 new deliverables in our application. While I'm talking about Whakakī, we're really pleased to receive a letter of support from the Whakakī 2N Trust, who have agreed to use their land, which is to the west of the Whakakī Lagoon, and for our Manuka plantation establishment. So we aim for 40 hectares, but at this stage they've agreed to 25 to start us off. So we'll hopefully do that the next financial year coming, and then we'll progress further with them and with discussions around how we're going to work on the other hectares. So I just want to recap on the last session. There was a couple of questions and I went back to the team and got those answers. So risks were identified and what we were going to do to maintain what we've done. So what mitigations were in place to ensure that our projects survived. And the team have all the project leads in their project plans have ongoing maintenance as part of their program. And also we're working with landowners and encouraging them to take ownership and maintaining the plants and fencing. And also with regards to the assets that we have, ensuring internally we maintain those, we are adding our assets, which will come out of mainly Te Tira and Whakakī. to the assets register. So we're working with Gans and his team to ensure we get the information they require. Also, we were asked for maps for each hotspot location, just to drill down in each area that we're working on, so we've included that in the presentation. Planting plans for the Karamura and Tukituk, so I do have those, so if anyone wants a copy, I've got one here. And I also have an electronic copy that needs to be sent through. And outline of budget, so in the paper, budget leads to identify the portion of their budget to each deliverable within their project, so you'll see that in the paper. I do want to highlight, though, in Ahiriri, I have made a bit of a mistake there in that the split I had put catchment works for $80,000. We decided that we could do more in that deliverable if we beefed it up for another 20k, so we did do that, and we took it out of the catchment hydrology, which is also known as the environmental flows. Right. Any more? That's probably the overview update from me. I'll get the project leads to come and give you an update on each of their projects.
Go for it.
Peter.
Good on that, Pete.
Okay, whoa.
Good image for Pete.
Kia ora koutou, Peter Manson. I am part of the land management team, working under Brendan Powell and based in Wairau. I've lived there for quite some time, so I've got to know the area and the people, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce this FIF funded project, which by right should be presented by Nick Cavielli, who's based in Wairau as well. But Nick is actually off to Auckland to attend the New Zealander of the Year Awards, so it could be incredibly interesting if a Frenchman wins that. So mentioning Nick, there's three people who've been very much responsible for putting this all together: Jolene and Andy and Nick Cavielli. So they are the three people who are really responsible for this. And behind the scenes, there's three or four of us doing work with the community to make sure this keeps on track. So we'll do this relatively quickly because you've got limited time and there's a lot more to get through. The first thing I'd like to show, and Jolene's put this together for me, is the weir proposal. The weir is designed to keep the lake within a range, a small range, so that it doesn't, at the low levels in the summer, do not affect the biodiversity and yet do not flood the adjacent farmers in the winter. Second item is the Wakatuku alignment. That's a stream that runs into, it's the main sub-catchment running into the lake. The lake owners are adamant, and with some support, that the sediment coming out of that catchment, which has got forestry in the top end of it, by the way, you can see, is contributing huge amounts of sediment to the lake, and therefore a diversion pushing it further towards the Rahui Channel would therefore drop silt into that area and rather than into the lake. So that will be funded as well. The third area is the Manukau plantation at the Whakaki 2N block. So that's adjacent farmland and different ownership to the lake. This incorporation has got a lot of cattle, and they have been blamed by the lake owners for the state of the lake, partially at least. So they have actually agreed to, just in the last few days, to plant 25 hectares, and they're looking closely at the second 15 hectares, so that'll bring it up to 40 hectares. Planting in Manukau, hopefully getting an income source similar to the limited income they were getting from cattle on a very seasonal basis. Then we look at the Manukau plantation around the lake itself. Now that's an area that's already been planted in natives, but there's quite a lot of spare ground that could be planted in Manukau. So that would assist the lake owners with some income from currently unproductive land.
Where does the income come from?
Manukau honey.
So it's honey production replacement.
Correct, yep. Up to school refurbishment. That is part of the community development side of this project. which is seen to be vital by the local community, and that will provide an educational opportunity for them to hook into the environmental outcomes, and yeah, it'll be educational and bring people in who can learn the skills and learn from this project. The recirculating wetland. This is Andy's baby, and there is technology available that can be solar powered. It's low pressure pumps that draw the, just in simple terms, Andy, he'll pull me up, but the slushy, high nutrient loaded bottom part of the lake can be drawn out and deposited amongst unproductive sandhill areas. It's not an ecosystem that's going to be damaged. It's quite separate, and it'll improve the soil sufficiently so that further manuka can be planted. So recirculating refers to the fact that water will seep back into the lake in a cleaner state. The Rohui channel fencing is indicated there, and that goes hand in hand with the weir and the alignment, Wakatuku alignment. I should say that quite a lot of riparian fencing has already been done in the catchment. We've been encouraging that for several years, and farmers have taken it up, and we've only been offering a very, very small grant, and they're still taking it up. So it's been quite impressive. They really have bought into this, despite the issues they have with lake levels. Where are we up to? Oh, the water buoy monitoring. So some of these water buoy and monitoring sites are already in place. That monitoring has been going on for several years in some cases, but some of those are new sites. So naturally we want to find out, are we being successful or not, and at what rate. Soil conservation plantings. So that's been going on for several years as well. It's greatly accelerated in the last 2 years. That has been separate from the FIF, but we're including that as part of the overall program. Naturally, you can't improve a lake unless you stop the sediment coming in the first place.
If I can
But we are dealing with...
So that, all that eroded hill country, what do you, when you say soil conservation planting, what are you planting?
Right, I was going to mention that. So first of all, you've got, just thought I'd mention that the top end is in radiata forestry. So there's a bit of an issue there that at harvest time there's going to be a slug of sediment coming down. However, that part of the catchment's protected the lake for some 25, 30 years. So we're rather fortunate there. The planting has been poles, poplars and willows. We are changing quite rapidly by farmer choice to natives. And this is a very dramatic change in recent times.
Wairau especially. What's happened up there? What's
happened?
You put something in the water.
I was just telling Nathan this morning that we offered, 2 years ago I offered pole planting virtually for free because we had the money left over at the end of the year for this from the Hill Country Erosion Fund from MPI. We couldn't get any traction, and they had all sorts of excuses. This year we're demonstrating some native plantings we did amongst a new protector we've developed as part of our Hill Country Erosion funding. And it's groundbreaking, literally. There's nowhere else in the country it's been done. We've got native trees, selected native trees growing successfully, and these guys are saying that's what we want to do.
Where? On those
Yes.
You point us?
No, it's a bit hard.
Oh, that's excellent. I think we should celebrate that.
Too right.
That's a real change.
Strangely, the first trial was with Robinia, which is, I don't know if you know it, it's a prickly acacia, and some people call it a weed, but out on the grazed country, it's very, Ian would know. Out on the grazed country, it's not a problem. It's very tough, grows very quickly, has all sorts of benefits for the farm, and that was the area we demonstrated, 7 hectares of it. The rest of the farmers are saying, oh yeah, looks great, but we'd rather have natives. So, yeah. You figure that out. I can't. It's good.
I know, just take the win, man.
Okay. We're on to, thank you, forced closure trials. So because we haven't got the weir in place yet, we've got an interim period where we're going to have to try harder to keep that lake level within that range. And so it will mean extra costs, extra machines in a very timely fashion down there, closing that bar with a lot of water running through it. We need to see if it can be done. Our last effort was semi-worked, but we didn't have enough machines at the time. Where are we going? Thank you, Jolene. Okay, last two things are bird monitoring and then that's and the public access to the lake. So those are little add-ons which, again, related to the success of the project, environmentally and culturally, and the locals particularly want to enhance the honey strain testing. So we want to know: are we actually making improvements here? Is the income source that's been proposed, is it really making a difference? And are they able to take advantage of it? So we're connecting community with environment. That's us.
Fantastic.
Any colour commentary?
I'm responsible for all that.
Yeah, that'll do. Well, we're going to give you the accolades.
No, I'm not. Actually, just before Peter goes, Peter's been battling that catchment for many, many years. The challenges around the lake and the values that at times are at cross purpose, i.e. the farming hapu versus the lake hapu, and the challenges that go on between have been ferocious at times. I think we're not quite out of the woodwork yet. I understand there's still some debate around the where that is going. As an example, we had an intern that was interested in doing some work there. That hasn't happened yet because some of the trustees are still a bit nervous about this stuff. So it's not all beer and skittles there. And I agree, the closing of the lake, if we could have pulled that off with a bit more machinery at that time, we would have alleviated a whole lot of challenges that we're now facing. The stream realignment is still challenging because we don't have the permission from all the landowners, and that's ongoing. But the planting in the hills is pretty stunning, and I think it won't take long for the whole of that hill country community, those that are thinking and reading and understanding the challenges that are coming farming's way with expectation now, I think uptake could be pretty good. The challenge will be, of course, there's a bit of funding floating around there, and it won't be throughout the rest of of all the other catchments to the north and obviously in the hills back down here. But Peter's been a campaigner, dare I say it, Peter, and you've taken all the uppercut punches with a grin on your face, and haven't had to give too many back, and actually you're getting some real progress now. So I actually think it's good payback for the work you've done over 20 plus years. Won't say how long you've been floating around here. We'll start calling you Graham Hanson, but the work is starting to pay off, and I hope that's satisfying to everyone involved, including yourself. So.
Yes, I've got a couple of issues, or an issue with regard to the Manuka plantation and the expectations from the honey scenario, and reconciling biodiversity. We've got a biodiversity strategy, and we've got the latest evidence coming out showing us that imported Italian bees placed in these locations are displacing a good percentage of native bees and native insects foraging on those areas. So how are we going to reconcile and manage between two competing agendas, even with our own organisation? One, biodiversity preached in one corner of the organisation. Two, we pick up on that and address that issue, but meanwhile we invest in something which may be contrary to our best biodiversity advice. Are there any comments on how we manage that conundrum for our respective projects?
This might be something that, I don't know, Campbell's not in the room. I think he had somewhere else to go to as part of the the High Performance Mānuka Primary Growth Partnership Program that we are co-investors alongside Comvita and various others, looking at those longer term issues around Mānuka, because in a natural system you'll get 30, 40 years of honey production, and then actually the Mānuka will be taken over by other seed stock that will come through. So as a transitional tool, if you like, to diversified native forest, it's a great cover crop, if you like, to get started with, and it provides income for a period. If people think they're going to be in the Mānuka honey game indefinitely, it will require rotation, and therefore probably spraying off of that Mānuka and replanting with fresh stock on a sort of 30, 40 year cycle. It's not what we're envisaging with this sort of planting we're doing at the moment, which is about longer term biodiversity and a transitional pathway to that. Those issues are being explored, and we are part of those national investigations.
Just to follow up, Chair, Councillor Curtin does raise a good point, but I think the key principle here is we're removing livestock from that area, those sensitive areas, and replacing it with Mānuka, which, while it may not be a perfect world, is a heck of a lot better in that particular place than is currently.
So just in terms of the Mānuka planting, and I'm sure over the next decade we're going to get many more propositions put in front of us about that. Where are we getting advice on the varieties or strains of Mānuka to use? Because in really simple terms, if you plant one variety of Mānuka from one place, you'll get about a month or maybe 6 weeks flowering. If you have a range of Mānuka, you can extend that 3 or 4 times. So are we doing that?
Yeah, my understanding is our trial site, we've got a number of different cultivars which are being experimented with. So we're probably, more so than any other regional council in New Zealand, very much locked in with the leading research around Mānuka production.
And the other point is that trial work that's happening up at Tūtera at the moment is revealing very, very high UMF Mānuka. So we're actually performing really well compared to national trials on Mānuka. So, and look, all of these things are live and real, and answers to all of these things we don't have precisely at the moment, but those are all the issues that we're working through.
I just want to hear that it's in the thinking.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
And we expect to hear from MPI with regards to the Regional Growth Fund in the next couple of days.
Next up.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and update you. So I've got a couple of areas to update you. One is the marine hotspot area and the other is Ahuriri. I'll make a start on the marine hotspot area. We've got 2 projects running under this. Now, the marine hotspot, as opposed to the other hotspots which were around work on the ground, how do we improve water quality? The marine hotspot was more around how do we improve our understanding of the Hawke's Bay marine environment. We have 2 projects. One is being led by my colleague Oliver Wade and the other being led by myself. Oliver is leading the assessment of a hydrodynamic model. Now, this has come out of the Hawke's Bay Marine and Coastal Group Strategy or Roadmap, and Mr. Wade will be speaking to that later. But an idea of what are some of the land-based impacts in the marine environment, where are they coming in, what are their impacts, and how do we improve our understanding around that so we can guide our management on land for the benefits of our marine environment. Part of this, or the initial part of this, is actually looking at the scope of inquiry. We could simply say it is all of the Hawke's Bay marine environment, but we would probably be asking for a lot more money and it would take us a lot more time. So the first thing we have to do is try and identify or pinpoint those areas where the biggest impacts are coming through or where we can see some changes. And step 1 of this is through looking at satellite imagery over time and looking at trends in things like primary production, where are some of the nutrients or some of the micronutrients coming in and increasing productivity in the oceans? Are they coming from the oceanic inputs? Are they coming from land-based inputs? Suspended sediments, are they coming through? Where are they going when they hit the bay? So Cawthron Institute are doing this analysis for us and we are expecting a draft report on that shortly. We've also been working, or Mr. Wade has been working with GNS and NIWA vessels that have been outside of the 12 nautical mile limit, which is the boundary of our jurisdiction, to collect water samples, and that's going to help us look at a water budget. So when we're looking at land-based impacts, we can't remove those oceanic impacts coming through as well. Often with oceanic upwelling, they can be really high in nutrients. So we need to understand both of those inputs together. We obviously don't monitor out that far because it is a fair way out. But GNS and NIWA have had vessels in the area, and Mr Wade's been able to actually draw on those to collect some water samples for our future needs, modelling needs. And lastly, within the hydrodynamic model, looking at model platforms. There have been a couple done in the bay, and it's about, can we access those? Are they fit for purpose? How do we use them? So that's where we're up to for the hydrodynamic model. The other part of the marine hotspot is looking at multi-beam survey of the Wairoa Hard. Now, for anyone who isn't aware, the Wairoa Hard is an area of cobbly substrate, which is between Moeangianga River in the south to the Wairoa River in the north. And it's known to be well, it was known back in the 80s to be an area of high fisheries productivity, nursery ground, habitat for juvenile fish species. It was closed in 1981 to set netting and trawlers in the hopes that it would retain some of those functions. There's been anecdotal conversation around, well, is it still cobbly? Is it covered in mud? What do we know about it? We've been sort of talking to MPI or the previous MFish for a number of years, saying, "Come on, let's look into this a bit more." But unfortunately, because they've closed it, to them it's sort of a pseudo reserve. So they've done they've taken out the stress. What we're wanting to know is it still actually performing the functions that we expect it to be performing and that we closed it to protect? What does it look like today, 30 odd years plus later? The only way to do that when you're talking about such a massive area and an area that is up to 30 metres underwater is to use a process called multi-beam sonar. And this is just a little demonstration of what it looks like. It's a fancy vessel that comes up from NIWA, and they actually map the seafloor. Marlborough South or Marlborough District Council have just had a really good program in place. Theirs was a huge program, though. They were undertaking it with LINS as well, because Queen Charlotte Sound is obviously a high traffic area, to look at the bathymetry. What this will give us at the end of the day is an idea of the terrain that sits underneath or in that area known as the Wairoa Hard, and we can build on that in future years, looking at what habitat types there are, what are the services it's providing, what are the functions it's providing, and how can we help it get along in that next step. So are we looking at replanting algae? Are we looking at all those things that we do on land? Do we have the opportunity to do them in the sea as well? So that's the marine hotspot. Shall I take questions on that before I move to Ahuriri?
Thank you, Chair. It would be fair to say, that the hotspots program is designed designed basically to find out what we don't know already, so that we can look to plan to the future what we can do.
Absolutely, and it is really led by that Hawke's Bay Marine and Coast roadmap, which is the presentation I think you'll get next. It was going to be before, and it's a collaborative work program.
Yep,
so
cool.
It's looking at a whole range of desires for the bay, aspirations for the bay, where do we want to go with it, and how do we get there?
Okay, so we get to a certain point when there's the hui's over and we're into the dewey.
Absolutely, and I'm hopeful that with these projects, they're all based on that. They're all based on that core understanding of the processes in order to say, actually, our major sediment area is actually not X that we thought it was, but it's actually Y, and we're going to get much more bang for the buck by going down there. Or it's coming from, we've been finding out about stream bank erosion versus hill country erosion. It could be coastal cliff erosion versus, coming out of river mouths. So it's a matter of being able to say, where are our key sources? Where's our best bang for buck going forward in terms of actually improving our marine environment?
Do you have any sense of a time frame when we'd be able to come back to us and let us know when that all starts, or how long it's going to take us to find out what we need to know?
For the hydrodynamic model, it's a bit of a moving feast. It very much depends on our access to other model platforms that have been used before and our internal expertise or capability in terms of running those. Also the questions we want to ask it. The multi-beam survey, that will be reported by May of this year, so we'll have all those kind of maps. We're also looking to come board or bring collaboration in. Oh, the one thing I didn't say, which I should have said, is the multi-beam survey is actually a collaborative project between ourselves. MPI are co-funding some aspects of it, and NIWA are also looking to co-fund some aspects as well. So that will be delivered in May of this year, and then it's looking at next stages. What do we then go for and find out? How do we use existing resources to fill in some of those gaps, and then how do we use national science to actually help us transit past and put into that journey?
As Councillor Barker will no doubt correct me, Patton was the one that said waiting for a perfect plan today before taking...
A good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow.
That's the one. So at some stage we've got to hit the go button. But
absolutely, and there are multiple work streams that have been suggested through the Hawke's Bay Marine and Coast Group. I don't want to take away from what you're going to hear next.
Yep.
And it is all part of that process. I mean, even looking at things like the Ahuriri Estuary, which we're talking about next, Whakaki Lagoon, all of those hotspots and the afforestation projects and all that sort of thing, they're all going to have positive impacts in terms of the marine environment. So when we talk about the marine environment, it's not just what's happening there, but the whole sort of strategy that we're aligning with is all going to be beneficial at the end of the day.
thanks, Alan.
Councillor Hewitt?
And I'm wondering how you can reassure me that the public money spent on marine hotspot analysis is going to actually go further down the coast, because as everyone is well aware, there was a huge storm back in 2011 that took out major sediment from all the way from Waimarama down to Blackhead. So that's a huge piece there, and I'd argue that there's still an ongoing impact of that sediment getting into the waterways even today, so into the ocean environment. So when are we going to see some action, a little more of that public money spent a bit more regionally?
Great question, and I don't think you'd have to argue about the impacts of that storm, because we've just been discussing it. The cray fishermen are seeing it. The crays are moving, and the pockets of that sediment that came in from the coastal cliffs appear to be sort of shifting in between little storm areas. This is all just what the cray fishermen have been saying. In terms of the regional point of something like the Wairoa Hard, obviously from a hydrodynamic model, it is based on a regional context. From the Wairoa Hard, it is a nursery area. So hopefully if you're catching snapper down in central Hawke's Bay, potentially you might catch more snapper based on the fact that the nursery area is better protected.
No, but you can't swim without turbidity most of the time down there. So I need to see when the work's coming down there.
So perhaps where that might be picked up, as well as the fact that Arnhem said the hydrodynamic model was in a regional context, so it will deal with aspects of the issues you raise, is that the work we're embarking on through the new LTP, if it survives those cycles, will in time address issues like erosion in coastal areas in southern Hawke's Bay as well as northern Hawke's Bay. That's part of the mix, because we recognise that, as Anna said, one of the most significant things we could probably do is keep soil on the land, and the benefits are not only to freshwater but to our marine environment. Whether that land happens to be right on the coast or at the top of a mountain is immaterial. It's really about keeping it on the land and not letting it end up in water. So those are the opportunities for a more targeted approach to perhaps some of these areas that you're referring to, as we've discussed. I'm certainly very interested in seeing some money put into those areas through our catchment activities.
And Mr. Wade did mention that the analysis that Hawthorne had done had highlighted the southern coast as highly turbid areas. So it's certainly not. It's certainly in our conscience and we are working towards it. It's a whole of region approach, definitely. Any other questions about marine? I'll flip back to Ahuriri. So we've got a few projects under Ahuriri, which Ms Townsend went through earlier. One is the Whakapomatis reduction. I know it says removal, that's probably my error. I'd prefer that to read reduction, because it is about reducing the gross biomass in there. The other obviously is the Land Management Action Plan, which Mr Burton will speak to later. the catchment works and then the environmental flows. So we had a very successful round in November with 216 tonne of Phycopomatus, or that calcareous tube worm, being removed. You can actually see the bund that it had made on Google Maps from satellite imagery, so I'm hopeful that the next round it'll show the gap that we went in. There is another low flow bunded area up at the top of the estuary. We were advised, well, we were asked not to go into that area in November because of the bittern roosting time. So we're looking to go in there in May and try and reduce that some more and reinstate that flow down there. We're also looking at potentially other options that we might be able to do in terms of the mechanics of taking it out. The environmental flows is an area that we're still scoping through, we're still trying to understand a bit more. Obviously the Ahuriri is a highly modified catchment, not only due to the 1931 earthquake, but due to diversions, discharges, reclamations and drainage in the years post that, pre and post that, and also the highly managed aspect of it in terms of how we draw water from one area and push it into another. A prime example of that is the stormwater from the Esk catchment, no, not the Esk, sorry, the Bayview catchment is routed from Bayview into a dock wetland, into a storage pond, across a farm and back into the top end of the estuary. So it's very, very managed, the waters here. One of the questions that we need to be looking at is how much fresh water does the estuary require in order to function properly? An estuary is a mix between marine and fresh water, and if we do manage water like that, how much do we need to allocate to the estuary for it to perform its functions? And what does that mean in terms of our roles and responsibilities in that? At the moment, that's just at the scoping stage, and we've engaged a NIWA eco-hydrologist in order to sort that out. I have just downloaded, if you're looking at my diagram, I've just downloaded that, so I didn't really know what it said. In terms of, I'll bring up Andrew Burton now, but in terms of rungs on the board and just taking into account what the chairman said at the beginning, this is a catchment that had no active plans for any planting or fencing 4 months ago. So just bearing that in mind when you hear what Mr. Burton has to say, I think all credit to him. He has done a fantastic job in the time it has been allowed. So any questions for me in terms of the two projects that I've put up?
And while he's coming up, I would say if you did not read pages 31 and 32 of the agenda items, which describes what he's about to describe, it's pretty phenomenal.
Excellent work.
What has happened?
If you want some free labour in May when you're digging the stuff out, because I'm happy to put a pair of gumboots on for you.
Got any kids you can just put on the job?
No, that's awesome. Great, thank you.
Any other councillors too that want to volunteer?
We'll provide you lunch.
I volunteered, Debbie.
Well, you're going to sit down, eh?
I actually have to leave.
Oh, well, can I grab you? Can I address this issue to you
Absolutely.
before you do go? Sorry to interrupt the presentation, but you'll note in the paper, in the earlier advice, we talked about having outcome measurements as a part of these reports, and I'm hopeful that in future we can settle on, for example, choosing sedimentation as the primary driver of issues, having some sort of outcome measure that we can monitor on the way through. So the expectation for the papers, the respective hotspots, was that we'd have an outcome to consider and then progress against that outcome. And I'm not clear how you feed into a long-term plan describing that. So, you know, what does this catchment look like in 10 years' time, and what are the milestones that are going to be met on the way through, so we can actually monitor that.
So, Councillor, that's a really good point, and the intention was that if you go to point 24 in the paper, sorry, is it 24?
Yeah, 24.
That's the Catchment Land Action Plan. That's not what I was thinking, but one of the original propositions for work in here that I still would like to achieve is the development of an integrated catchment plan, which will set objectives for the catchment, and timeframes, and deliverables, and individuals or agencies who will be tasked with delivering that. That might be over a 10-year or 20-year horizon, but it will set that out.
Sure.
We are struggling to get traction with the committee around the development of that.
Well,
But that's the document that will bring all of that together and allow us to kind of articulate the vision, the objectives, the outcomes.
Well, the thing about this, if I may, Mr. Chair, is it's getting those in there is a bit like waiting for Godot. It just never happens.
And we can't. We've been told clearly by the committee, you don't go and do that without us.
I appreciate what you're saying, but we could, and that's why Anna's here, is we could choose a measure such as turbidity across our monitoring sites and settle on those as default measures of our outcome measures across this catchment.
Certainly, we can absolutely do that, but I think the point that Mr. Maxwell is making, and it's a very valid point, is while we can manage and work on areas like sediment erosion on stream banks and hill country, we still have pump stations that other agencies manage that are going in. So while we may meet our criteria or may have a better performance, there are other inputs that are not managed by us, and so to get a clearer idea, it's certainly that kind of overarching management plan which we saw in 1992, and I think is a very likely outcome from Te Komiti. It's just the time steps that will be necessary in order for that to actually happen. It's a little bit more delayed than our time frame in the hotspots.
We need to have an off-camera discussion about it, perhaps.
Not a problem.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Andrew Burton from the land management team. I've brought on a 12-month contract to do this work in the Ahuriri and then in the Tūtera catchments. I was told right at the beginning what the issues were, and that was from Anna, and that was that they were sediment and nutrients coming in from the catchment were at very high levels, and I wasn't going to argue with that whatsoever. We looked at the water quality data, and obviously that was telling us there's very high nutrient levels. As far as sediment, we looked at SEDNet, used that data that was brought into the council for the tank catchments, and that was telling us there was relatively high levels of sediment coming into the catchment as well. There was also anecdotal evidence that, particularly in the upper catchment areas, there was sediment accumulating in those areas. So using quite a few data sets, such as SEDNet and tank, which are modelled data sets, and also a soil and technical survey, which I carried out before I started doing the action plan, we could work out what was happening, where it was happening, and what we had to do about it. And SEDNet in particular breaks down the catchment into sub-catchments, or what it calls stream cells, and they can be down to about a 5 hectare size, so very, very detailed data. And that can tell us where in the catchment different amounts of sediment are coming from, and from what type of sediment generating processes, whether it's stream bank erosion or slip erosion, tells us where it's coming from, so we can start to target parts of the catchment. We can find hotspots within the hotspot, basically. The highly erodible land layer tells us the same type of stuff, but it targets within those cells which parts of that cell is the most readily available, or sorry, highly erodible areas. So we can, on a farm-by-farm basis, start to target what we want to do and how we want to do it. SEDNet was telling us that 90% of the sediment coming from, or over 90%, was coming from landslide erosion. So obviously that was something that we had to work at. When I started the program with discussions with staff, it seemed like what we should be targeting might be lowland areas where we're putting in wetlands and things like this. But this data was telling us something different. Start at the top areas, look at the most erosion-prone areas, and work on those. So that's what we did. Using the HEL and the SEDNet data, we managed to target those areas in the catchment, and we went to those farmers, or I went to those farmers and started to work through with those farmers what SEDNet was about, what the program was about, and also what we could do to resolve some of those issues we have with erosion. So, yeah, basically working with those farmers, we've come to, I guess, work plans for each of those farmers in the area, and we've got about 13 or 14. There was one yeah, there was one farmer that we decided we wouldn't actually do any works on because the way he was managing his property, and he was managing the regeneration of native in the gullies and up the erodible slopes pretty well by just the grazing management regimes he had. We decided that we wouldn't do anything about or do any works on those properties. So it was those other areas that with those farmers we've come to an agreement that yep, we'll do this work. They're going to be putting money into it. We'll be putting money into it, and we'll get these programs in place. One of the, as I was saying, 90% of the sediment was meant to be coming from landslide erosion, but we've found when we get out into the field there that stream bank erosion, particularly on the, I think it's the Wharerangi stream, is quite significant. It's pretty atypical. It's not I wouldn't say it's a stream that behaves like most streams do, and so we've got some major stream bank erosion issues on that, which in itself could basically tie up the whole 100,000 we have for this program if we wanted to. This area in particular, this photograph here is one that I've had Works Group come to me, or come out with me and have a look at, and they've given me a quote for, I think it was about 14,000 to fix it up. So you can see that issues like this could actually tie up money very, very quickly, and it's money that generally landowners don't have. Anyway, as far as the works that are going on there, I've detailed what we're doing. We're doing quite a bit of planting for slope stability, because landslide erosion is the issue. Quite a bit of fencing along the riparian areas as well, and like Peter was describing for the Whakaki catchment, we're actually using natives as well as poplars on those slopes for land stability. I'll leave it at that.
Chair, just before any questions, so Andrew's done some fantastic work, and this is a really nice little working example of what our catchments program might look like. So Andrew having direct engagement one-on-one with landowners through a process that's identified where the issues are, so we're going to the places where the problems are and carrying a toolkit which is not only the knowledge he brings and the knowledge that sits within the land management staff in the building and the engineering staff, but resources to help deal with it. So this is a really nice example of what ultimately we might see more of happening across all of our catchments through the catchments program as we roll it out in the start of the financial year. Fingers crossed it survives the LTP.
So again, the time frame on which you've been working on this?
The funding has to be spent by the end of June. That was the mandate. So some of the work's obviously going to carry on beyond that. We will be getting fencing materials and the like out for some of the fences, and the fencing may go up later than that. But I have to say some of the fences are already up, so we've actually started the action program itself.
So working back the other direction, from when you started to engage?
Oh, when did I start to engage? I did the action plan basically in October, November, early November, and started to meet farmers late November, December, January.
So 5 months or so.
Yep.
I mean, about a year ago, Garth Isles drove me around this catchment and driving around, and he's pointing here and he's pointing there, and he says, well, you know, this is what needs to be done. You need farm-specific, you know, property-specific plans, and you drive around for 45 minutes and say to him, well, how long would it take to do that? And he to get those plans together, because I'm thinking, how many years is he going to tell me? And he says, I could do it in 3 or 4 months, which is what you've just established is the truth of the matter.
Yep.
That's what it takes. That kind of property by property eyeballing, which has seemingly been given a bad name by previous governments, as you know, everybody's searching around what's the mousetrap here to get people to do the right thing on their property. It's good advice, isn't it?
It's advice, and as you say, it's advice on the ground too. Farmers like a one-on-one. They like to meet on their own grounds, and if you're going to discuss your issues, that's what you do it anyway.
So this dollar amount here, 91,000 council, 72 landowner, as a result of these meetings, these guys went from not doing anything to committing $72,000 of their own money into this project.
Yep, most of it is, I guess, money in kind. They'll be doing the planting, putting up the fences, quite a few of them, that type of thing. And that's really important so they can actually get some ownership into it. They'll start to care for it. And obviously we've got, although it's a short time frame program, we have got them as part of this commitment to actually do the follow-up and make sure that the plants are looked after. The weed control is done for the next 2 years or whatever.
So, Chairman, if you could visualise in the long-term plan 16 Andrews doing this year after year after year, we can achieve in 1 year.
16 Andrews. That's
well said, James. That's all we need.
Right.
This is fantastic.
Well, if we could clone them, we would.
The science, obviously, pretty critical, I think, for the farmer conversations. It's not just the council's opinion. We've got the SEDNet modelling and the water quality data and what have you to back it up. So no one can argue that there's an issue. You just get on with the solutions. So I think we're just seeing all the stars starting to align, and the sort of reaction we're getting from farmers, both the Whakakī example and here, shows that timing couldn't be better for what we're trying to achieve.
And this follow-on thing, the planting plans, I had a conversation a while back with Hugh Ritchie, who said, well, you know, the problem is, you know, the council, he's for the council to come in and implement a rule that says we've got to plant X number of kilometres of fencing by. But, you know, that is not what I know how to do. I need somebody to come in and tell me what to plant, when to plant it, where to plant it for best result, and so forth. And that's what this seems to be doing.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Andrew. Did I hear you right? There are how many landowners in that catchment that you've spoken to, or that you needed to speak to?
I've spoken to 15 different landowners. 13 we've got plans on. One is, there's one that's basically doesn't want to do anything, but
yeah. And there's one that's already doing it at any rate, right? Bloody hell! Sorry, excuse my French. That's fantastic.
Can I just make one quick observation? I just think what they've had for these two presentations proves that if you have the vision of what you want to do, the ability to put it forward, people will do the right thing. I think what we're doing is simply surprising ourselves at how ordinary people will do the right thing if they're asked to do it.
With a bit of help.
But still, they're still going to do the right thing.
Can I just make a comment on that? You're right there, and there's a lot of works going on out there in the stream management, wetland management and hill stability side, which we're not involved with, and farmers are doing a huge amount out there. We just don't know it's happening as well. So all we're doing in situations like this, and it's easy to do, is to actually just add a bit of momentum to what they're already doing, or if they have stalled for a while for a particular purpose, and that might be just that economics aren't grand on the property at present. This is just getting back into it.
Or simply put, a catalyst for change. Something's happening and the change is going to flow on other places. So that's what we've become. It's really exciting.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate in that catchment that we've got 2 or 3 model farms already. I think that the Hawkes and the Caves, and also Robert Patello's, you could stand them up against any farm around New Zealand as far as environmental standards, and they would be up the top.
And the replanting at Whakakī even surprised the local councillor.
No, he took credit for it, didn't he?
No, it was surprising, but he still took credit for it.
Surprised us.
Surprised us.
Next up.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent stuff.
Tira, okay.
Mr. Chair, can I assume we were doing a local commentary.
Yes, I was. I'm sorry.
Yes, I just make this observation that I think the hotspot discussion deserves to be rounded out to incorporate a number of the issues. For example, with the Ahuriri estuary, there are several disappointments which go with the successes, and that is particularly around Mana Ahuriri attending to their business and getting alongside this council. So that needs to be said, that we have a player not at the table that should be. The other aspects of it are that alongside the good work that's done in the upper estuary environment, we're needing to see what's happening, if you like, on the human health side, the contaminants that go in. So we've got key issue sedimentation, also key issue contamination, and we're needing to address and attend and see brought to the table in these reports For example, the discharges from the Napier City Council's sources, and we're needing to see the health of the estuary in terms of swimmability. All of those issues need to come to the table, and I keep going back to it, and I appreciate that up in some future distant point we're going to have the outcome measures, but there are measures that we need to introduce. One is sedimentation, and two is contamination, particularly from a human health point of view with E. coli. So I hope the next iterations of our reports start to gather some of this balancing data together in it.
So, Mr. Ambassador, I understand that you want the staff to do these things. What are you doing as ambassador to crack the whip with Mana Hariri and your friends in the Napier Council and so forth?
My email overruns with emails to try and precipitate this, but we're needing some sort of godly intervention to.
That's why you're there.
Well, I can appreciate that.
Could I just take the opportunity to defend Mana Hariri in their absence? I don't pretend at the moment to speak on their behalf, but I do know something of their circumstances, and they have been heavily engaged in a whole pile of other issues with the treaty settlement, which has been completely absorbing, and I feel that any criticism of them, if they're not attendance to other issues, is in the circumstances unfair.
It wasn't to criticise, it was to emphasise that it hadn't happened.
Well, that's a criticism.
Well, okay, whatever.
Mr. Councillor, you also would like to see haste on some of these different projects, and you know, from what I hear anecdotally, and this is not my area of special focus, there are foot draggers for whatever reason, and if they, you know, that has to be acknowledged. If that's the case, we have to move on, right? We have a tank process that's underway. It has its timetable to proceed with. We have Napier City Council presenting a tank tomorrow, actually. It's planned for wastewater and its 3 water strategy and so on and so on. So other parts of this machinery seem to be moving forward. And then what happens when late in the game a hand is raised and says, we weren't consulted, or, you know, we didn't have a hand in this? What are we supposed to do?
Well,
we keep going, Mr. Chairman.
Of course we keep progressing, but I just felt that the way in which it's portrayed, I read it as a criticism, but I was just trying to put the alternative of it, that there may be very good reason that they're not here, not able to do it. Now, that may be just something that we just have to carry with us, but I just thought to make the point.
Point taken.
That's all I was trying to do. A casual observer might have read it something different. I'm just putting the counterpoint.
On to Tira.
Kia ora koutou. This kōrero is a overview of the Freshwater Improvement Fund for
This is
Tūtera.
beautiful. This is beautiful.
It's a nice map that's easy to read.
On high res.
Yep. So this project's called Te Waiu o Tūtera, the breast milk of our ancestors. It's working in collaboration with Maunga Hararu Tangitu, who are co-sponsors as a part of the project. The map that you see in front of you or behind me is, I guess, details the activities that are associated with the project. Going through the 12 key activities that are associated with the project. First one starting at the Integrated Catchment Management Plan, the ICMP. It's been brought up before. I guess the focus of that specific activity is to get a collection of the visions and aspirations within the catchment, cement that, also look at the different agencies working within the catchment and ensure that we're rowing on the same waka in the same direction with the purpose to improve mauri within Lake Tūtera. Going down is the farm environmental management plans. They'll be provided free of charge for the landowners in the upper catchment of Tūtera. That is also earmarked to be Andrew Burden, so building on the awesome mahi he's done in the Ahuriri catchment. and supporting that is also the farm initiatives, the subsidy scheme, so $500,000 over the lifespan of the project. And similar to what Andrew was saying before, he will undertake a point analysis within the catchment or something similar, which will identify the high-risk sites, and that's where we'll look to concentrate our subsidy schemes. Moving on to some of the other activities, the reconnection of the Papakiri stream. So on your map, in the northern end of Tūtera, currently the Papakiri stream isn't going into Lake Tūtera, so we're looking to reconnect that to help with longitudinal flow, with the view that it may assist with the lake becoming less stagnant than what it is at the moment, and also strengthening of that diversion. So currently during heavy rain events, we've got sediment coming, overflowing the current diversion and entering the lake, which is contributing to the legacy of sediment sitting in the bottom, the key source of the issue within Tūtera. We also have a proposed air curtain for Lake Tūtera. We've obviously got one on Waikaupiro at the moment. We're working through some of the challenges that we've seen recently there, and Andy's team are undertaking an analysis of some of the issues that we faced with the aeration curtain on Waikaupiro, and no doubt have a conversation about the suitability of the air curtain in Tūtera. Sediment traps, so we are harvesting forestry in this catchment, so we don't want to be seen to contributing to the further degradation of the lake, so we've got to make sure that our sediment traps are top of the line, and we're doing the best environmental practices we can when harvesting that forestry. Cultural monitoring program, that's really important for Maunga Hararu Tangitu, and one of the outcomes is obviously to improve Māori within the lake, and we'll put that back into MTT's court, saying how do you want to see Māori monitored, and so that program will, the establishment of that program will start this year, and it'll be ongoing throughout the lifespan of the project. Riparian planting around the lake will also be ongoing, and that's a part of the current project, Tūtera Maunga Iwi, which is run by Maunga Hararu Tangitu, led by Maunga Hararu Tangitu. Ongoing monitoring, so there will actually be an increase in the monitoring within Lake Tūtera and its surrounding water bodies. So Papakiri stream currently doesn't have telemetry or a full-time water quality probe in that stream, so that will be installed this year. There's also a new water quality buoy in Tūtera at the moment, and the old buoy has been transferred over to Waikaupiro. We'll also start monitoring or sampling Ōrākai as well, which is the smaller lake in the left bottom of the map. And to assist with some longitudinal flow through Lake Tūtera from the north to the south, we're also looking to put in a southern outlet which links Waikaupiro Lake and Ōrākai Lake. That's about it.
What? You right there, Chair?
Sorry?
You right there?
He's on.
I'm just studying here. Can I ask a question first, please?
Yeah, where you go.
On the paperwork, the budgeting of this, the single biggest item in here is $687,000 for this little outlet at the bottom. Against the scheme of all these other things that you're describing here, it just jumped out at me as
pretty
an awfully big price tag relative to everything else that we're talking about doing here. Is that?
Well, my understanding of the cost is because culvert needs to go into State Highway 2, it's going to be really expensive.
I understand why it might cost that much, but given that it does,
yeah,
is it
worth it? I guess the other thing besides longitudinal flow, getting a flow from the north to the south, is fish passage. Currently, eels aren't able to move into the lake. There's the current outlet, which is the Mahiaruhe stream, has a significant sized waterfall, which is obstructing the movement of eels into the lake. our understanding, it's over recent years that it's it's become so steep that eels can no longer move up where traditionally they could. So this will provide an important fish passage for eels and galaxids.
Surely for like $600,000 or $700,000, it would be really easy to go and capture a whole lot of eels and put them there. Sounds a hell of a lot cheaper.
Translocation programs are actually quite expensive, so you wouldn't be a small thing.
I think it's a permanent solution as well.
Yeah. Once the pipe's in, the pipe's there for good. So,
Ambassador Bailey, would you care to comment?
I think the tuna should be able to swim.
Yep.
I don't want to see tuna.
We have
bloody tuna.
We have every effort has been undertaken to try and get the tuna to go up the other avenue, and it so far has proved not as successful as we would have anticipated. So, as TK's pointed out, this is a permanent solution for that particular issue, I think. And if you look at it in that respect, rather than going, that's just a big chunk right now, I think it's quite cost effective. In terms of everything else that's ongoing up in my ambassador role, the negotiations with the interested northern landowners is still ongoing. Hopefully come to some resolution at some stage. And I'd like to congratulate Andy for keeping everyone updated that's involved with the project on what was happening with the bubbler in Wakapiro over the summer, because we did have a bit of an issue with some fish dieback, and we got on and got on to what was actually happening there, and that's we're still waiting for his final report on that as to what his thoughts are on it, but no doubt it'll be coming in due course. The monitoring of Orokai, if we're going to put the southern outlet in, then clearly we need to be thinking about what's a baseline for us to be looking at there, and what the condition of that particular lake is in, so that we don't make things any worse than what they are. So there's a whole bunch of things to take into consideration before we plough ahead with anything like putting an outlet through, including obviously cultural and what the community really feels about it. So,
Roger that. And the majority of the activities have an action point, before undertaking any work, that we have to go through a correct process of engagement with relevant people. And the other thing I'd like to add is the relationship we have with the Mangahuru Tangatu Trust and the Maina Iwi project is really significant and working, I think, really, really well. Big thanks to the staff that are involved in that. Steve's still here, or has he run away?
He's gone.
It's gone. So, and TK obviously. So, thank you.
So, Councillor, you would say we have the right mix of interventions on the table here. A la what Councillor Curtin said, are there any hiccups that you would point to that might disrupt this?
Look, I think there's been a lot of work that's been going on before today. It's been ongoing for a long time. The key ones looking forward, I think, are being able to put in wetlands or the diversions of the Papakuri stream, dealing with those particular issues, and that's an issue we're dealing with the landowners there. And then the other one, of course, is the integrated catchment management plan and getting the fence done, and very, very encouraged by reports in other catchments, like at Whakakī and with the and Ahururu, so that'll transpose, because I think the desire is very, very similar up into the catchment of Papakuri.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I think the work's excellent.
Cool. All right.
Well done. I like the pictures too.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Nicola. I am in the land management team here at the council. So I'm talking about the Tuki Tuki hotspots. We've got 3 of them. We're just showing 2 on this map because they're quite far apart from each other. in the catchment. So these two are just outside Takapo Township. As you can see, Takapo one is right outside, and the other one is further down the Takapo Ormondville Road. And then the third one is just underneath Tamata Peak by Craigie Range. So the Makirikiri stream restoration is the biggest of the projects that we're doing in the Tuki Tuki under the hotspot. It's a stream restoration demonstration site. It's really important to the local community, so not just the marae but also the school landowners have shown interest in this area. And the actions that are going to be undertaken here are going to be stock exclusion. We're going to reduce some of the stream bank erosion along that stream, weed control, putting in a path and some planting so that the community can come and visit. And actions to date have been, we've had a whakawātia out at the site last Sunday, and Councillor Graham and Hewitt attended on behalf of HBRC along with a few other staff members. So it was like a spiritual clearing of the site before we start, and then since then our works group has been quite busy out there. They're building some of the gabion baskets, which is going to look after some of the stream bends, doing a small amount of stream realignment, and then they're going to get started on the blackberry out there, which is pretty essential. So there's also a wetland going in. This is the one that's on the corner of Whenuahoa Road and Takapau Ormondville Road, south of Takapau. So this is restoring it to a native plant environment. It's going to have enhanced filtering of water quality there, as well as biodiversity gains by planting up this wetland. And you don't have a before shot, unfortunately, but the diggers also been busy out there. They've taken out some willows and some broom, and they've cleared this section of old road so you can walk along it. Yeah, and the fence is going to go up. It's going up as we speak out there.
Is that a wetland at the moment? But it's
yeah, so it's just grass at the moment.
It's grass?
Yeah. And so the third one is this is Craigie Range Winery is just, well, you can see it on the left there, and the stock from this particular property get into the Tuki Tuki River occasionally, and to the upset of a lot of people. So this is trialling some new flood fencing, so it's going to be flexible PVC kind of standards and biodegradable polywire. The idea being that when the floods come through, the posts will just bend, the wire will snap off and it biodegrades. It kind of dissolves up. And so the farmer can just go back and the post will bend back up once the flood finishes and put the polywire back through. So we're putting in part of it, and the farmer is really keen to do more, so we'll end up fencing off quite a bit of that.
Who's the farmer then?
I don't know his name, unfortunately. Sorry, Brendan.
Mick Small.
Oh, is that Mick Small?
Yeah.
I imagine the chair will be very disappointed with this because he won't have anything to take a photo of anymore.
I want to go down and take a photo of putting it in.
Stop behind the wire, maybe.
Yeah. We'll have some up on social media soon.
When is this actually going in?
The date for that is
It's starting this week or next week? It's very soon.
Yeah, it is very soon. Sorry, Brendan is actually managing that particular project, but yeah.
Could you let me know, actually?
Yep.
Thank you.
Put some kettle in the room.
Yep, so those are our 3 Tuki Tuki hotspot projects.
Debbie, anything to comment on these?
So, Nicola, I'd like to acknowledge what you do. You showed when we were out there last Sunday the passion that you have for your role and your competence and your capability, and I really enjoyed just hearing you just doing your thing, and I acknowledge what you do. I'm wondering if you can tell me the rationale. When we were looking for this 10% rate increase, one of the things that we went to the public in Central Hawke's Bay and told them was that there would be money for Lake Hartuma. So I'm wondering how we've ended up spending, how these hotspots were chosen, and how we've ended up spending the money there and not on Lake Hartuma, because one of the things I understood was there were some issues with Lake Hartuma being private land all around, and yet everything we're doing is on private land. So if you can explain that, that would be interesting. Or get someone else to.
I'll give it a go, and then I might hand over to Ian. So my understanding is not so much that Whatuma was private land, but that it was difficult to get all of those private landowners on board. Subsequently, we have actually, we are spending a significant amount of money in Whatuma doing willow control.
It's been ongoing, basically.
No.
No, it's a new big chunk of willow control with DOC, I believe.
Yeah, so look, one of the challenges, as I think I've explained before, is that the lake is in multiple ownership. So if you want to alter levels, you have to get the approval of all of the landowners. It's far more complicated than having an individual landowner and putting a fence up. If you want to undertake willow control, it makes little sense to control willow in a slice of it and ignore the rest, because reinfestation occurs. So the indications are through some work that Brendan's been involved in. He's not here because he's rushing a ministry staffer back to the airport to catch a cancelled flight. Is that there's been some success potentially, and the word is that all of the landowners are united around the lake, and there's a desire to do some willow control. So we're pursuing that, and a local John Cheen has put forward an application to do some willow control. He's been successful with the DOC community and fund to the tune of about $30,000, I think, to do some of this work and to develop some further thinking in the space. Like I say, we're very interested, the proviso being that everybody's on board, because otherwise, you know, to be frank, we may as well put a pile of money on the edge of the lake and set fire to it if it's only controlling or dealing with a small aspect of it and not the thing in its entirety. So we're very, very keen, if it's been successful and everybody's on board, we'll be in there right behind the community with money to help make it go faster. So that's a work in progress.
But let me ask you about that, because in the Tutira case, we have more, sounds like we more aggressively have targeted a set of farmers who have been part of a problem, and we've cajoled. I'm not sure what you two guys have done up there, but you've been after those folks to, you know, see the light, so to speak. The Hariri example, we went out, we identified 14 farmers, we met with them one-on-one, we made a case to them, and look what happened. Here we keep seeming like we keep writing it off, saying, oh, well, we got some farmers who won't cooperate, and then we move on and do something else instead.
It's just a slice of lifestyle, very small blocks.
So this lake, and Graham Henson with 40 years of, as you described, buried bodies could speak in spades about it, I'm sure. This lake has a long history of this council and its predecessors engaging and trying to get solutions around levels and willow control, and has been continually stymied by different views and different aspirations by landowners, some wanting lower levels, some wanting higher levels, some happy with willows, some wanting them removed. So getting a coherent view on that and a coordinated view has been virtually impossible until it appears very recently. And given that the community sounds like it's organised itself around a common vision and some outcomes, well, we're all ears and we're right behind it, if that's the case. So this council has tried often and for a long time to deal with that lake, and has been challenged continually to be able to achieve anything. And
but you're saying if they do it, we're behind it. In these other cases, we said we got out in front.
What the point I'm making is that we have tried exactly what you've said.
How recently?
Oh, look, even slightly prior to my arrival, there's management plans have been written for the lake. Garth Isles could speak in spades about this. It was one of the top 10 priority wetlands for the region. I think it was
10 years ago.
I think it was number 3, and there was a huge amount of effort put into trying to get the landowners to share a vision, and a lot of money spent on trying to achieve that, and nothing worked. So the reality for the Tuki catchment right now is that there's a hell of a lot of other issues, a hell of a lot of other challenges that could be addressed with our time and effort. People willing to work with us, and that's where we've gone. If the community's organised and they want to work with us, well, we're right behind them.
How do we do that, Ian? We've got some people there like Grenville who want to do it. How do we?
Well, it sounds like they have. So if they have, that's fantastic.
I think the distinguishing feature for Whatuma is that
as Debbie said, it's actually a whole lot of quite small property owners that actually extend in and include the bed of the lake. So if you look at Ahuriri and look at Tutira, you're talking about the properties within the catchment. So you got the advantage and not trying to downplay the challenges equally in Tutira, but it's a little bit different where if you look at Whatuma, you know, it's a mosaic of almost urban-sized properties in the middle of the lake. So you're actually dealing with quite a different animal in terms of their absolute connection rather than saying they have a catchment interest. So it's just another level of challenge.
Yeah, but there's not many of them though. There's not. Well, there's 12. How many of them are there?
There's
quite a number.
There's 14 or 16 on one side of it, and two major landowners being the other.
Because I understand from members of the community down there that it's actually doable, and it has. I've been around and talked to all these supposed awkward landowners, and they're prepared to make a deal. It's just got to be the right deal.
Oh, and look, contrary to the 15 years ago, we took the willows out. So, you know, the challenge in this, and I think it's what Jolene started with, was a commitment to maintenance and a longer term vision about these things. You know, we'll be going back to do what we did do 15 years ago that took us some years and, in fact, legal processes to get in there and remove, you know, raupo and willow. So, yeah, it's not impossible. It's a new time and some new landowners and certainly some changes in you know, sort of an iwi context that we can move forward more substantially.
I would like to take this one off have a mono with you at some stage, Graham, about it, because we're talking the same. We're looking at the same goals, but we're talking at different methods of getting there completely.
One-on-one's not really a solution because I need everybody to help with this one, and I thought that the goodwill from the community was during the long-term plan consultation really strong to see something done there. So hence my sadness. What would be the appetite? For instance, one of the major landowners in there is he owns the actual bed of the lake.
Gerald.
Yes, and he said to me, you know, why don't you come and buy it from me? I mean, is there an appetite there for council to become an owner of this strategic wetland? I mean, it's just something to throw on the table, and I'm not endorsing any more rate increases, James, you know that. But here's another discussion that somewhere to go with that.
Suggestion.
Yeah. From a staff perspective, we are very interested in the wetland. Like I say, it's one of the biggest and most significant wetlands in the regions, in the top 10. We have been challenged by this intractability of issues around individual perspectives on what people wanted to do, and in the meantime, we were like, well, look, there's a whole lot of other kind of burning platforms that we need to address. We'll deal with those, and in the hope that eventually this one would reconcile itself. And it sounds now as though that is the case. There's a window of opportunity to go in and say, look, can we broker a deal? Can we get an outcome? Bring some resource? It's one that would probably fit nicely, not if it doesn't meet this hotspot program into the catchments, integrated catchments, and the program we've got there. So there's still lots of opportunity there.
So Debbie, you started this by prodding us that why aren't we doing this? Is your sense that the political opportunity is there?
I think it was there 12 months ago when we did our consultation. That's my sense. You're not, I mean, even if you don't get everybody, I've really enjoyed what I've seen today on the screens with, you know, there's some gnarly issues, and the staff have come back and gone bang, 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 you know, TK here, but there's nothing that I mean, that could have been replicated down in Lake Hawke too, I think. I know you say Lake Hawke, but that's not to detract from the work you're doing, and I certainly acknowledge what you did and what you're doing in the catchment. And also I'd just like to make note that I think were there 4 staff there on that Sunday? 3 or 4 staff. I mean, these guys that were all out there, it was cold and it was early on a Sunday morning, and you're driven from, some from Napier, I'm not quite sure.
All from Napier, yeah.
So, you know, that in terms of giving up your Sunday, I acknowledge that too. And Rex came down. So.
Can I just, Debbie, is this an opportunity for you to get all those, there's 20 landowners in a room, and we come down and have a chat? What do they want to do? Is this an opportunity for you to
they have pretty regular meetings. John was here earlier, John Sheen.
Certainly, we're very happy to, work with you as politicians to make that happen. Provide the opportunity to have that sort of discussion and bring in the kind of technical competency to help shape
Oh,
it
that's
up.
right. Well, of course you need to do that, but we do need to get. A chap owns that whole lake bed, but you know what's it worth? Well, he's not exactly farming it, is he?
He does hunt it though.
So
He does hunt it.
he hunts it. Yeah,
Farms
well,
it in a kind of way.
yeah, but we can give him hunting rights. Anyway, I mean that's not a problem for us. So, but there's a
He told me he would.
so
He told me he would.
It's unlimited.
Well, mind you, he's got his new big dam, hasn't he? Of course. So
But in all of these hotspots, it seems to me the mix that we're looking at that makes them successful is that we've, on the one hand, done science and other work to identify that there are realistic, achievable solutions that'll make a difference that need to have political sponsorship.
They do.
That's strong and persistent and in the face of those who are balking. And that's what seems to be missing here.
I can tell you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
You've heard,
Thank you.
And the final one, the Karamu.
oh, you bad boy.
just
Well,
while,
it's
just
huge,
while,
isn't it?
just
And
while
I've got
Link's-
more than 20, by the way.
while Link's coming up and getting organised,
that's a big man.
there is a really, really good news story on this.
I'm not getting that far yet, but I was
No
going to
pressure.
update you. Yeah.
We can probably deal with this one in 2-3 minutes.
I've got,
That's not even the big picture, you just give them the little picture.
I've got 5 more sites. There's some repetition from what you've seen earlier, but these are the 5 Karamu hotspots. So we'll just go through them in order from the distance from the coast. That's the numbers up there. So the first one's Parker. Do you want to flick through there to the first site? So yeah, early stages with these projects, we're aiming for planting in June. We may start in May. The site here, just upstream, just west of Koapariki Marae, left bank of the Karamu Clive, and I've been advised on the new name there, Parker. I'm not sure if you're as familiar with anyone, but I was advised that's the original name for the area. So we're working with 3 landowners adjacent there, just doing some fencing, done some old man's beard control and silver poplar control, and we'll look to be doing some planting this year. One, thanks. So the Brookvale wetland, as it's called at the moment, as I'm calling it at the moment. So we've just done some arboricultural work there. So there's a few substantial trees, probably about 100 years old. But the big oak tree on the corner. So we had the arborist in there to clean up those and some of the gum trees there. And we've done a round of maintenance with spraying, weed control, and scrub barring. So that the lower photo there shows the state today, so pretty much ready for, we're just going to go in there and fence that, put a permanent fence in, and then prepare that for planting. You got that planting plan on the right there. Paki, so that's part of the program, so all these are part of that Karamu enhancement strategy, and we're just working through, around the spring there, working through some developments on that. So yeah, this is the one Mr. Maxwell was referring to, I suspect, and so I'm advised that the fencing will start this week, in the next couple of days, and be completed in about a week's time, and that there'll be a media opportunity with the chairman next week, probably looking around Thursday, so there might be a media release around the progress here. So that's about 1,500 metres of fencing.
So just so that you've got the context here.
Yeah, I know the context.
You will recall the fiery meetings that we had at Mangarawa Marae 2 years ago.
And the Scotsman who owns the land.
Yep, and an intractable position on fencing, that's all gone, and we've got fences going in, stock excluded. So it's a really good news story, and again, individual one-on-one contact with landowners.
Just ask a simple question. When you're planting, are you going to be planting so that when the plants are mature, they will shade the water?
So this is a bit of a different one to our typical enhancement sites. So I've identified, this is all private land, so I'm with the open space development team, and we normally work on public land. This is private land, and the landowner wasn't interested in looking after any more trees or plants. He's got enough in his portfolio. That was his words to me. But I suggested that we try. I've identified 25 weeping willows at the stage. That was the initial thought, at about 30 metre spacings to try to get some shading over that waterway there. So this will be a 2-wire fence, electric fence for cattle only, and potentially that is subject to some high flows, water flows. So potentially that will get taken out and need to be repaired. So we needed to keep that in mind with the planting as well. It'll be hopefully resilient to some high water through there. You can probably pick up those patterns, those flood patterns over the paddock there from the aerial photo.
So are those plantings agreed?
Yes, so they're circles which identify a single willow tree is what we were going to try. We haven't actually done that. We've planted a few weeping willows, but haven't done it on a project quite like this. But yeah, thinking about it, there is the opportunity to try some natives in there as well and diversify a little bit towards it. Certainly, you're pretty close to the water table, I think, where those are, even though it's really harsh conditions out at Bridge Park. And finally, Kahuranaki stream, we're calling it there, up at Hawke Marae, so 40 kilometres upstream. Above it flows into Lake Pokawa. And there's some photos there of the arborists working. So yeah, a lot of weeds, quite typical site there. Ground cover, a lot of willow. So we've been through there, opening it up. It does look like a bit of a mess because it's exposed a whole lot of metal and rubbish that people have been dumping there over the years as well. But it's in a state now where it's ready for planting. So yeah, we've got some bark chip that we've left on site, and that's the next stage. That won't need fencing there, and we'll hopefully get the marae involved in that one, which is important. Marae that was sort of missing from the Karamu strategy to date. So, covered those sites.
Excellent.
I would just like to add to that and thank Anne for all the work he does, and we've had some interesting conversations. Of course, a huge catchment, difficult catchment, hugely modified, lowland stream, challenges everywhere you look. But despite that, I've had meetings with several of the very large landowners and certainly the large cropping guys. They all understand the issues, they all understand the challenges, and they are all wanting to get on board. So that's, we have a lot of goodwill going forward. One of my personal objectives is to try and get the community involved as much as possible. I don't think we can do this alone. And getting the community to embrace it at Marae level especially, and that's one of the things behind my initiative of having a committee, a Karamu committee, looking for a site in a marae where I can have a permanent site where we can meet. So get all the maraes involved alongside the big growers as well. So they're all sitting down together saying, well, who owns this stream, who owns this drain, and how we're going to fix it. So we don't do things in isolation, although we do it, but all the dots eventually join up. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good stuff, of course. Forest and Bird, I jumped the fence just yesterday, actually, and walked up all the work that they have done, because you told me about that ant, so I thought I'd go and have a look. From the Peka Peka right to Pakipak, they have planted up. It's just stunning what they've done, and I intend over the next couple of days to ring them up and thank them for their work. That is a really good example of a community of interest, being Forest and Bird, getting out there with shovels in hands and planting and keeping it clean. It is stunning what they've done, and it's we need to inspire the rest of the community to help, because if everybody did a little bit, we could tidy this catchment up in a really short period of time. So getting everybody in there, and talking to the landowners. I was privileged to be involved in the one, or the previous one at Brookvale. And once I talked to the land, you know, I did say I might call it after them, by the way. And so I noticed you'd said. Once you talk to the landowners, and they are major landowners, the biggest landowners in Hawke's Bay, actually. And they were really keen. Once you talk to them and say, look, we will need to do this, our guys are targeting this as an opportunity, they were really keen to do it. And I think that we're finding that. We find that in Wairau, we're finding that here, that the landowners are saying, right, what can we do to help? And we need to grab that enthusiasm while we've got it. And it's because it's the only way. We do not have the resources to do this ourselves. So a lot of things happening in the Karamu. Regional Council are doing an enormous amount, and I noticed that you've given another piece of land to Forest and Bird, just around the corner on St George's Road. And I jumped the fence to have a look at that as well. So that'll be fantastic as well. So there's a lot of good stuff happening.
Did I miss? Do you have a convening date for your first meeting of your council?
No, I haven't. I'm quietly going about talking to various parties and just getting there. And I've been quite busy on a few other things as well, so I've been dragging the chain a bit. And I need some help to contact all the Marais, talking to James about how I go about that, and get everyone in the same room. But I'm really keen to have a meeting place. I don't want it to be here. I think it needs to be effectively on site, and I've got a couple of places targeted for that.
Okay. That completes, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
I need some guidance from the council here and the chief executive, perhaps. It's 3 o'clock. I think there's a hearings committee scheduled.
Yes.
There is.
We're waiting patiently.
There is two agenda items that we have not reached. One is the Marine and Coastal Group update, which Neil will be very concerned about not hearing. And then there's, in this operational activities, there are at least, like there are a lot of issues in there, but there were 4 in particular that councillors had particularly indicated interest in hearing about. One was the level of water consenting going on the Haratunga Plains. There's material in here on that subject. One was the status of tomato mushrooms and that whole controversy. One was the FEMPS, the status of FEMPS in the Tukey catchment. And one was where do we stand with CHB and its various water issues at this moment in time. What do we want to do here? Do we have to adjourn for purposes of the hearings committee, or what?
No, I don't believe so. We can continue on if the committee wishes to do so.
Press on.
Press on?
Yep.
All right, well,
press on with speed.
With speed, okay.
I'd like to move.
Speed.
I'd like to move the recommendation for the previous paper, which is to
okay. What is that?
That the Environment.
Where is that? Remind me where that is.
Page 29.
Page 29.
The Environment and Services Committee receives and notes the February 2018 hotspot freshwater improvement funding projects update.
I'll second that.
Aye.
Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, adopted. Well, then why don't we, as I said, the paperwork is in item 14, operational activities, but why don't you bear with me and we'll just go through the 4 that seem to be the most, have the most issues around them. One was the concern, Peter in particular, I have had a concern about. We declared a moratorium on water consents in the Haratunga Plains. There seemed to be a steady flow of these consents showing up in our weekly reporting, and you all put together a paper to assuage us of our concerns. So could you summarize your assuaging?
It's automatic.
That's right. So I've given you basically a full list of takes that have been applied for across the Haratunga Plains.
Yep.
Highlighted the first 6, darker shading.
This is all on page...
it's in the attachment one, page 53.
Your agenda.
So there's a lot more, but there are either replacement consents, or there are people who've come and asked for consents to be merged or changed something, changed a bore, so they're taken from a slightly different location, so the bore number's been changed. So all the ones that follow after those 6 plus 2, no change to the amount of water that they've been allocated in the past. The first 6 are all new, and basically we considered they fell within the criteria that we did include in that.
Already in process.
In process, yeah. Yeah, so we're in the door, or had been discussed prior to the 18th of August. So, and I mentioned there's probably about 3 more that have actually still fall into that category that we haven't brought through and issued yet. So that's the amount. It add when you do the sums, it adds up to a volume of over 500,000 cubic metres allocated annually. So it starts to add up, but that was to just address and cover those people.
500,000 out of 80.
90 million.
Out of 90 million.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied, Peter?
Yes, I know. It's helpful to understand what we were seeing on a weekly basis, looking like a huge volume of water coming through the system. In actual fact, when you do the analysis, it's a different picture. Just, I had one question, which was the moratorium, James, you announced on the 18th of, or it was in May last year.
August.
August.
I thought it was May. Was it August?
August.
Okay, so that's why this is dated August. That was going to be my question.
Okay. On this issue?
Yes, yeah, thanks. All the ones that are in white that are just renewals or rollovers or whatever else like that.
Yep.
I assume that part of that renewal was that, depending on what comes out of tank, they may or may not be amended. The particular takes.
Yeah, a lot of these aren't actually renewals, and actually I don't. We would have more. Ones with the number 17 would probably be renewals. WP 170540. So 17 is showing you the year 2017. Anything earlier is basically something that's been in process and is getting changed in some way. One thing we're doing, when a lot of these consents won't carry an annual volume previously, so when they come in the door, we are assigning them an annual volume. Tank, my understanding is tank will go back through, once finalised, it'll set some guidance. We'll go back through all the consents, review them to line them up with the tank approach.
Right.
And then if that still leaves the catchment over-allocated, or the zones, depending how it's broken up, if that leaves them over-allocated, then there's a second round to sort of consider to take water back.
Okay, and that's written into the consent that's been. These white ones here.
Yeah, we include a review condition or review clause in all consents, saying we will review to line up with an operative regional plan.
And you'll notice also, Councillor, that every single one has an expiry date of the 31st of May, but the year will vary slightly depending on the actual location within the broader Heretaunga Plain. So, for example, all the ones in and around Clive expire on the 31st of May 2025, but so they're not long-term consents, but they are consistent. They will all be renewed again at the same time.
I noticed that they went long-term. I didn't notice the geographical location thing. So no, thanks for pointing that out. No, excellent.
So can I just ask one more question? And I'm probably going to get this slightly wrong, but as I understand it, under our current rules, if you have a take that's less than 5 litres, I think it is, per second, and less than 20 cubic metres per day, you do not need a consent.
That's correct. That's
so I have no idea how many consents that are, and I'd like to know. I'd also like to know whether that's one of the things that Tank will be considering, whether those remain the appropriate rules to have.
So, as I understand it, Tank is looking at removing that provision. Right. And there was a vote on that, I think, at the last meeting, and there was some division around it, but I think the majority were in favour of getting rid effectively of the 20 cube allocation. Right. How many takes there are out there of that nature, we probably don't know, on the basis that it's permitted activity.
There is a report estimating that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but there has been a bit of work done just to sort of fit it into the context of the modelling and all that work.
Yeah, I know.
So there is an answer I could provide.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Farm environmental plans are discussed on page 59. Who's going to discuss that for us?
Nathan Heath's down the back. Farm plans, Nathan?
Oi, he's up.
And here I just think we were looking for just an update on where things stand and how's it going. Which this paper does seem to...
So Nathan prepared in the agenda towards the back.
Page 59.
Page 59 and beyond, which he's probably not got in front of him, so I'll pass it to him. An update so he can give you any highlights from that. Otherwise, I'm sure it's taken as read and you can ask questions.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, just outlining, I suppose, the effort that's been gone into promoting the uptake or the early uptake of these farm plans over the last 2 years, and showing how that has had an effect. There's still a lot outstanding, but I think the imprint of the effort that we've done has been to target larger farmers in priority areas, and as the map shows, in those priority areas we've typically had in the range of I think it's between 30 and 60% uptake in those areas, whereas outside of it it's been as low as 2% of the catchment area under a farm plan. So it certainly had an effect, and you'll have seen at the back the amount of effort we've put through advertising, marketing and communication in terms of getting people to take up the early offer of a grant to help do these things, but also to get in front of the game. There's still lots of work to be done, and no doubt that the emphasis is changing. Certainly that the here to help, if you've seen in the branding from the land management team, and here we'll help you get in and on with it, has now become a message of why haven't you got one? And I think we're certainly shaping up to be pretty strong and heavy-handed at the other end of the scale once the deadline has changed and passed, making sure that we follow up, and anybody who doesn't have one has a plan of attack for getting one, and has lots of robust things around that.
So the paper says that there are now 15 approved providers and another 7 being approved. Does every serious person, every serious farmer have access to a provider at this point, would you say?
Yes.
So that's no longer a bottleneck?
Not necessarily, no. There's been incredible fluctuations in demand, and I know I've had a number of the providers ringing me up after Christmas saying just no one was contacting them, and yet we're seeing quite a steady increase in the number of farm plans coming in. So there's a real seasonality to when they're undertaken, and they're looking for people to support that. The capacity issue was a challenge earlier on, and primarily from the quality of the farm plans being delivered on. We put a lot of effort into making sure that the plans we were receiving were up to spec, not only from Schedule 22 and Tuki, but equally involving my team going out there and making sure they're actually identifying critical source areas for phosphorus. We're actually identifying the appropriate mitigations that we would expect to see in a farm plan. So that's actually taken a lot longer than you would think. There's been, and some people we've actually rejected, and they're at the bottom of the pile, waiting out our work with others until they meet the standard that we're happy with.
My $1,000 plan is in process.
Chairman,
anybody have any questions about this?
How many farmers haven't done their plans?
Right about 800.
Big number.
Mm.
Councillor, I'd note, if you look on the table on the second page, that around 500 of the properties are under 50 hectares. And so a very, very large proportion of what we're dealing with are smallholders. And it does look like we've made reasonably substantial progress with the larger run holders. And I guess that is part of the challenge to this. But certainly I don't accept the notion that people don't know about the expectation. I understand that every landholder that's affected has been written to 6 times now. It's pretty hard to drive through Central Hawke's Bay and not see the billboards. There's obviously been plenty of other media used as well to get the message out there. So people are well and truly on notice. So when we move to a compliance and enforcement phase in the middle of this year, there's really no excuses. Now, obviously, we'll be encouraging people to comply and giving them an opportunity to comply in the first instance, but our patience will run out pretty damn quickly with this. And then once people are non-compliant, we will be moving through to the other options we have available to us to enforce the plan provisions.
And allied to that, there's a program of pretty intensive advertising through the local Central Hawke's Bay Mail over the next few months, right through to May, just reminding people that the end of May is the deadline. So there has been a lot of work. There's going to be quite intensive, hey, don't forget folks, up till the end of May through targeted media.
We've got 5 farm plan workshops and 8 information sessions targeting specifically the less than 50 hectare small farmers over the next 3 months. A number of them don't actually need to do a plan. They need to acknowledge and provide a raft of information for us, but they meet that low intensity, low area spec. So we're hoping to deal with a number of those quickly, but also put those that are still requiring a farm plan on the right path to getting that done. So there's a real effort by the team over the next 3 months to target that group in particular.
Debbie, do you want to ask?
Oh, no,
No?
I think
Okay.
you've covered it. James had said you've written to everyone whose properties are over 100 hectares many times, so I was wondering, my question was going to be, what are you doing to target the lower land holding acreage, and I think you've done that. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Next on the list is tomato mushrooms. So the only discussion of that in the paperwork is on page 51. There's a brief little update there. But James, I think, is in charge of this update.
So we've continued to receive a fairly steady stream of complaints from residents regarding odour, which is not surprising given the warm summer conditions. And we have had compliance officers responding to those complaints. We have in the last week or so been out on site, verified the objectionable odour and therefore the non-compliance with the consent conditions. I think there's been some media coverage in the last 24 hours of the fact that tomato mushrooms are pursuing an option to develop a composting operation in Central Hawke's Bay, which would provide an alternative to their current site in Brookvale Road. And that's something that we are in discussions with the consent holder about presently, even just this very day. That process will not result in resolution to the odour issues quickly. It will require its own consenting processes with consents involving other councils. And it will obviously involve a design and construction phase, etc. So the good people of Havelock North will continue with this issue for some time to come, and so therefore we are considering all of the issues associated with that presently, including the evidence collected in the last week or so in relation to the ongoing odour, and I'll be making some decisions within the next week or so in terms of our next steps.
To relocate to Central Hawke's Bay, would you need water permits, water consents?
So tomato mushrooms have applied to us for a water permit for the composting operation, but they will also need other consents in relation to odour, probably traffic and noise and things like that, given the rural location, as well as land use consents from the Central Hawke's Bay District Council.
Is there water to be consulted? Is there water to be consented in Central Hawke's Bay for a purpose like this?
I couldn't give an answer off the top of my head on that. I don't know, Liz, whether you know. Malcolm's here.
They've applied for high flow water. They've bought a property which has water on it.
Okay.
So they've got access to some water and they've applied for some of the high flow water that's available for storage and use.
Okay. Any other questions about that situation? Okay. I think the last one on the list was CHB wastewater explorations. What does all that stand? Say they have a working party being, this is on page 50. There's a little...
Look, I spoke to the Chief Executive of the Central Hawke's Bay District Council earlier today. We're presently working with the District Council on the work program which they are proposing to expedite. That had previously been on a slightly longer track under the court-ordered work to consider alternatives to their current infrastructure. It's been upgraded as a priority by the Central Hawke's Bay District Council itself, and I think that was evident in their presentation to this council late last year. And so we're now just working on the detail of that that technical design work for an alternative and permanent solution, which will require some consent variation in the fullness of time. So, as I understand it, the odour issue in Central Hawke's Bay has actually been resolved largely as a result of mist sprayers being put in place. It's not a satisfactory long-term solution, but it is mitigating the worst of the effects on the neighbouring community for now. And I don't think we've received any complaints in terms of odour down there.
No, we haven't. Any other questions on that?
So,
I'm sorry?
so when you say speed up, can you give me a bit more description about that?
So, from memory, the court order last year gave them till I think the end of this calendar year to have undertaken a review of their infrastructure and come up with some longer-term solutions. They have decided, as a consequence of the work that was done pre-Christmas that was presented to this council, to cut that short, or cut to the chase really, and get on now with a detailed design alternative, as opposed to continuing to evaluate the performance of their current infrastructure. So they've really just drawn a line and said, look, we don't want to navel gaze at our current infrastructure too much longer. We accept it's not good enough, and we accept we're going to have to spend some money on an alternative. Let's just get on with it. And there are two alternatives. One's an activated sludge treatment solution. The other one is discharge to land. And so now they want to do the detailed work on the feasibility and costing of those two options, and then bring that back to us. So that's positive from our perspective, and we'd expect clarity about where they're going much sooner than the end of this calendar year.
That's really good. So when do you expect them to come back with the options, and preferably the preferred option?
So that's the nature of the conversation with them right now, is specifically that work program, and discussion with the consultants about slotting on the work. But we're talking months. I would have thought by the middle of this year we'll have a pretty clear idea of which of the two pathways they're going down, and once they've got that, they'll get on with detailed design.
Okay, that's quite positive. Thank you.
Separate issue, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Just in regard
just to finish, is everybody satisfied with that?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Just in regard to the Bailey Trust application at Icarri Station, that's on page 52. I just wonder whether we could have an update on precise location of the consent, and impacts on, I'm not sure which catchment is, the Rupaturi River or the Mungaroi River.
Yep, sure. We can send that information out. Yep.
Okay. Would someone like to move accepting this report? There are plenty of other issues in there. I hope you all read them. And
second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Accepted. Last item, Marine and Coastal Group update.
Absolute best for last. Ollie's going to come up and update you on the quite significant bit of work that he's been involved in keeping this group fed, watered, thinking, producing thoughts and documents and direction. So Ollie's got a very quick presentation and then questions, I guess.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for squeezing me in. I thought I was going to get bumped there for a minute.
This is good for whitebait, Peter.
I'll just dash through. I'll skip a few slides and dash through the most, and just get to where we really need to get to. Yeah, so just an update really on where we are with this marine and coastal group. We have a draft roadmap which will be coming to you shortly out from the group. Obviously in 2016, which seems like a long time ago now, Dr. Haggett from East Coast was here presenting to council around what we do and do not know around the marine environment. All through last year, and that led to the formation of the Hawke's Bay Marine and Coastal Group, which, although chaired by ourselves, includes a whole range of partners, including commercial and recreational fishing industry, MPI, Department of Conservation, Tagata Whenua, things like that. So we're quite a unique group, probably in the country, in that we're actually all sitting around the table and talking happily together about what people like to get passionate about, and it's quite a contentious issue at times. So where are we at now? I'll just skip through these. So this is really the guts of the roadmap, which hopefully I'll be able to bring probably to this committee or to the council at the next meeting with a finalised version from the group for you to look at. But it focuses on these three central themes: so terrestrial and coastal linkages, ecosystems and habitats, and fisheries. And what really got me excited, I guess, seeing all the hotspot stuff before, is that actually all of that relates to this roadmap. Everything that happens on the land relates to what, you know, to what's happening out in the coast. So it's really encouraging to actually see that, you know, there is a lot of stuff going on already, and it all relates to this roadmap, and we're already getting a lot of runs on the board in terms of reducing nutrients into waterways, reducing sediments, and that all ultimately ends up in the marine environment. This is the theme of the roadmap, developed to ensure the restoration and ongoing health of the Hawke's Bay marine environment. Fisheries in there because this started, I guess, as a there was a fishery focus, I guess, in terms of you know, this group was born, I guess, out of community concerns about not being able to catch fish in the bay and how that might relate to what's going on the land. And for us, I guess, this year, the roadmap is already influencing what we do as staff. There's elements of it that are feeding in through to the LTP. There's elements that are feeding through to how we look at our state of the environment monitoring, and if we want to, when we examine programs, we can think about this roadmap. And certainly in terms of the hotspot funds, so for example, the marine hotspot, that's really been guided by what has been prioritised through this roadmap. So we're kind of, the roadmap's not completely finished. It's basically, the text is finished, but it's just being beautified in terms of, it's gone to the comms guys and externally to be made to look nice. This is the front, the cover of it. So it's gonna be a really nice looking document. But at the same time, we're also getting to the pointy end. Well, we've got a roadmap, that's all well and good. It's going to guide us in terms of the research that we need to do around the marine and coastal environment to help us to manage it better. What do we need to do that? Well, there's a whole raft of things, but certainly one thing that we need to do is we think about how we're going to fund all this kind of stuff. And I really feel like we as a council, like we're really ahead of the 8 ball on that. We do have things like the Hotspot Fund. You know, a lot of the roadmap is around understanding terrestrial and coastal linkages and trying to improve those. So a lot of the work that we are already doing and are already funding is going into our understanding of the marine environment. What we're struggling with at the moment, I guess, is the buy-in from other people around the table. You know, so this isn't a journey that we as a council can go alone. You know, we need to get buy-in from the other people around the table in terms of actually stumping up some dollars to contribute to research and management within the bay. I guess Hawke's Bay traditionally hasn't, the marine environment has been kind of the poorer cousin around the country in a way, and that there hasn't been a lot of money spent on it, and for that reason the level of understanding that we have around how it functions and things like that is very minimal. So that's where we're at the moment, and I guess it's thinking about how we can, I guess it's a two-way street in a way. It's how we can leverage funding from other organisations who are sitting around the table, but how also as a group or as different organisational groups sitting around the marine and coastal table, you know, we have access to different funding, you know, different funding streams, different from different areas. So how we can pull all that together. so yeah, some quite robust discussions to be had, I guess, for us through 2018.
Can I just pause there with you? Because this is where I think we need to help. They are the protagonists.
Yes, so this is all the people currently sitting around the table.
They are sitting around the
Marine
table.
and Coastal Group. Yes.
So clearly some of them are dragging the chain. So we need to know so we can talk to them. We need to get them all in the room and we can come and talk to them. But we need to. So they can't. Is it the fishing boys? Is it the recreation? Is it DOC? Who's dragging the chain here?
Well, I guess in terms of a lot of what we're, a lot of the work that we're talking about is in the fishery space, and obviously that's not currently a realm that is our responsibility. There are obvious people on that up there who.
So we would look. One of the key funding partners in here is MPI. They've been the most challenging partner to get money out of thus far. So if we had...
right, worse than the recreational fishers?
Absolutely. Given the size of their operation and their budgets, they're the hardest ones to get money out of at the moment. So if we could have a little bit of help for the ministry to see value in funding this in partnership with us, perhaps through our Minister of Fisheries, that would be fantastic.
Minister of Fisheries. Who's that?
Well, what we need to do is we need to know, this is kind of the discussion we need to have, because we need to know how much money do you want from the people, what do you want to do, what's the total budget, and how much do you want from each one. We can start talking.
You need to make that circle into a pie chart with some percentages.
Yeah.
In it.
We can do that.
And what's your total amount that you need? So we can talk to the various players and say, well, where's your cheque?
Well, what you also need is out the front of the council chamber is one of those sorts of thermometer things.
Yeah.
Funding for raising the church spires and school pools. And just put that there and do the contribution.
So in that context, number 13 on this paper says HBRC proposes in the draft long-term plan to increase spending in this domain. What is our proposed spend? Because I can't remember.
So I had Anna pull together the figures for me recently, and I circulated to you them. It's about 600,000 a year currently we spend in coastal marine. There's about 200,000 of new fundings come through the LTP process and the hotspots. So in rough order, the pie chart we're looking at here looks like about $500,000 a year.
That's not much, yeah.
It's about 200,000 from us, 200,000 from MPI, and 100,000 from the rest. So it's about $5 million over 10 years to do the research, because this is long-term research. It's not sort of snappy one-year programs. These are long-term programs.
And you got a paper, and that's what we want.
That's what the research documents are that will come to you shortly. That will make sure lays all this out for you clearly, so that you can use that to take around your.
And that's reflected in our current long-term plan.
Yep.
Budget.
So we've made provision for this in our long-term plan process.
Well, Rick is actually right. It's not quite as graphic as Rick's. We're not going to do that, but he is actually right. We have to embarrass the various parties. And we have to publicly do it. We have to talk to them as individuals and say, get your checkbook out.
So the challenge for the Minister of Fisheries, and he has indicated that he's keen to see a proposal from us, is that his research bucket through the Ministry of Primary Industries for Fisheries Research is cost recovered from industry. And as a consequence of that, there are long and difficult discussions going on with industry on a continuous basis around their contribution to fisheries research, and it has been going down in both real terms and nominal terms under the previous government for pretty much the whole time that the previous government was in power. So now he has a challenge to turn this around, not just for this region, but nationally. So that's pretty difficult, but certainly the contributions that we've tried to elicit to date from the local quota holders with Ngāti Kahungunu Holdings Company, we've really struggled to get a financial contribution to date from them for this exercise, but they are obviously in that kind of sweet spot of tangata whenua, commercial fisheries.
They're not actually, tangata whenua is the wrong word, it should say Niki.
Yeah.
Tangata whenua is the wrong word, because tangata whenua was in with us at HB, at Hawke Bay Regional Council. Niki has a commercial interest.
Commercial fishing industry. That's correct, but certainly they do have a seat at the table.
Mr. Chairman, our Marine ambassador has been patiently
Ah,
waiting
sorry.
the floor.
I just got excited. End of the
End
day, we get excited.
He's
you know?
like a thoroughbred.
Just looking at the group of
Waiting for the gates to open.
looking at the stakeholders here, and looking at this program, terrestrial coastal linkages, ecosystems, habitat, the folk that appear not to be there are the biodiversity people. Is there any scope? I can appreciate HPRC as being a vehicle for that, but equally, is there scope to have biodiversity as a central component of thinking around that? What's the thought?
That's in your strategy, isn't it, Ollie? I mean, that's implicit within the development of this work. This represents the places where there are financial contributors, I guess, to the outcomes, to the research, and it's inherent that the kind of all of these activities will in one way or another contribute to biodiversity outcomes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, you've got players around the table, and to use Keiko's example, we're a bit of a team here, and I can't think of a better person to give the number 10 jersey to Keiko to be on this amongst this group, or someone else with either off the bench or.
Yeah, there are quite close linkages, I guess, between the two groups. I'm the marine and coastal representative on the biodiversity group, and yeah, only yesterday I was having a meeting with Genevieve about how we can kind of leverage off each other, I guess, in terms of getting funding and sort of combining. I think in May is the biodiversity trust launch, and trying to I guess pull the two groups closer together, because there is obviously a biodiversity element to what we're doing, and there's not so much a marine aspect to the biodiversity strategy, but there's certainly a coastal aspect in terms of sand dunes and things.
Well, the linkages are very, very strong.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So, I mean, the question I asked, for example, in terms of your funding graph, is Ministry of the Environment, some of their heritage funds, etc., could very well be fitted by the criteria here around research. It's about turning over all the stones to see what.
Indeed, and that's, I guess, where that two-way street is of what funds can we gain access to, either us, through the regional council kind of route, or through those other, through those other groups who are sitting around the table.
So this committee will meet again in 2 months. Is that when you will be able to bring back a strategy with?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So on Friday we have a meeting of we generally meet around quarterly, the Marine and Coastal Group, and on Friday we have a meeting just to totally finalise the look and feel of the documents here. I'll be able to bring that to the next meeting.
I'm desperate to move.
Second? Anyone second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Any other comments? Mover, seconder? All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks, Oliver.
Accepted?
Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver.
We had one minor item. I think that we had two, but one I think has been covered.
I'll hold the other. I'll hold the other one over, Chair. That's right.
You'll hold the other one?
Yeah.
How generous of you. In that event, the meeting is declared closed.
Can I just say, for those who are here attending the hearings meeting to follow, which should have started at 3, we'll have a 5-minute break to give the opportunity for people to clear the room, have comfort stops, etc., and then we'll commence.